The swarm came like a living storm, a tide of claws, fangs, and chitin that blackened the horizon as High Fleet Leviathan descended upon Oroch, one of the mightiest orc strongholds in the Octarius system. To the hive mind, this world was nothing more than biomass waiting to be harvested. It had broken 1,000 civilizations before and would break this one too. But Oroch was not like other worlds. Oroch was alive with the roar of war engines, the thunder of artillery, and the endless laughter of greenskins eager for battle. The ground shook as billions of gaunts poured across the blasted plains, shrieking and clawing in a mad rush to overwhelm the orc lines. But instead of prey, they found towering gargants striding forward on metal legs, weapons spitting fire hot enough to melt a carnifex in a single blast. The smaller orcs, too, rushed to meet them, axes raised, teeth bared, their war cries echoing over the battlefield. It was not fear that filled them, but joy. For to the orcs, this was not annihilation. This was the fight they had been waiting for. The first clash was a massacre on both sides. Carnifexes crashed through the orc ranks, smashing bodies aside, only to be met by squaggoths with jaws wide enough to snap them in half. Death dreads tore into the swarm, their saws screaming as they carved through thick chitin. But for every Tyranid slain, the hive mind adapted. Out of the endless tide came bigger monsters, monstrous hybridules, Tyrannifexes, spewing corrosive streams that melted armor and flesh alike. Yet the orcs only grew louder. Their war bosses screamed for more, their boys roared in defiance, and every spore released by their dying bodies took root in the blood-soaked earth, sprouting new fighters. The war became a cycle with no end. Tyranids devoured fallen orcs, their biomass feeding new, stronger breeds that crawled from birthing pools within hours. Orcs were crushed, but their spores seeded the battlefield, and within days, new mobs rose, fiercer than the ones before. Each death only fueled the next wave. The world itself became a breeding ground of endless conflict, a nightmare where evolution and war fed upon each other. Amidst this chaos, strolled the overfiend of Octarius, the greatest orc warlord of the system. Towering over his boys, clad in armor thick as a fortress wall, he bellowed with laughter as he faced a hive tyrant twice his size. The two collided with the force of titans, claws against claws, the ground cracking beneath their struggle. Neither gave way. Both seemed to exist for this one purpose: to kill, to fight, to never stop. Around them the battle raged on, a storm that could not be quelled. Weeks turned into months, and Oroch itself became unrecognizable. Once it had been an orc stronghold, filled with workshops, fortresses, and breeding pits. Now it was a wasteland of burning wrecks, mountains of corpses, rivers of ichor and oil. Tyranids consumed everything they could touch, but the orcs rebuilt just as quickly, hammering together weapons out of wreckage, breeding squigs from the very meats of the dead. It was a planet locked in a loop of destruction, with no path forward but war. The hive mind realized that this was not prey, but something else entirely, something it could not finish. The orcs were not a resource to be harvested. They were an infection of violence, a wound that could never be closed. But still, it did not leave. The Tyranids could not abandon the world filled with so much biomass, just as the orcs could not abandon the greatest fight they had ever known. The war spread beyond Oroch, spilling on to Octarius Prime itself, where the biggest and deadliest greenskins waited. Gargants larger than mountains marched into battle, and bio-titans the size of cities came to meet them. And so it went on. Every clash birthing more blood, more violence, more reasons to fight. The orcs reveled in it, convinced this was the best thing the galaxy had ever given them. The Tyranids continued their endless hunger, unable to resist the lure of fresh flesh and new biomass. No winner could be named, for neither side knew how to stop. The galaxy outside Octarius watched in silence, some races whispering prayers of relief that the two monsters had found each other, others fearing the day one might finally emerge victorious. But victory never came. There was no aftermath, no peace, no resolution. Only endless war, spiraling out of control, feeding itself like a fire that could not be extinguished. And in that inferno, one truth became clear. The Orcs had found their eternal battle, and the Tyranids had found prey that would never die. The grim and simple. When violence meets hunger, there can be no end. Some wars are not meant to be won. Some wars exist only to consume all who enter them until nothing remains but the echo of endless battle.